Hey, what's up, guys? If you're watching this, hopefully you checked out the email first. In there, you'll see a couple links to some material that we're going to look at here in a second um, to sort of explain everything I'm about to tell you. But first of all, here to begin with, if you have not already, please pull up CourseDin, pull up the prompt for our final project. That's what we're going to start with. As always, there's a bunch of stuff there that I'm not going to read at you because I trust you can read. Some of the particulars, though, the length of your submitted video or audio. I would prefer video, but we can talk about that as we go. Anyway, the submitted work that you're going to give me, I would like to be, I say at the very least in the neighborhood of 10 minutes. No, I know that feels like a long time, but as you come to put this stuff together, I think many of you will sort of realize that 10 minutes is not that long at all. Anyway, 25% of your final grade, I understand that that's rather significant. But again, we're going to work on this for an extended period of time. This is your final project. This will not be due until like the end of the semester. So you got some time on this. What the assignment is, it says group presentation because I came up with this assignment maybe optimistically with the thought that by the time we got to it, things would be slightly better, and they are. But anyway, it's optional. The group aspect. You don't have to do this with the group. If you do, I would ask that you are as safe as you can be, just like we're all sort of trying to do right now. Distance, mask. You can do a lot virtually these days, as I'm doing at the moment. So anyway, again, and we can talk about any concerns you may have in that regard when we meet on Wednesday. What the assignment is. The lowest of low bars, I would say, is something akin to like a YouTube video, a podcast sort of thing, because I'm going to have you submit this to me electronically. And we can toss around some ideas maybe at the end of the video. But basically, I want you to, you can think of this project in two kind of ways. Number one, I want you to sort of sell me maybe on another movie. Like if I teach this class again, we did Rocky, Die Hard, and The Matrix, and we talked a lot about all of them. But maybe there's like one movie out there that you feel like would be better than one of the ones we have, or say somehow I'm able to teach a fourth film the next time I teach this class. What movie do you think would be really cool if we added it to that conversation that we've had with those three films? So I want you to do that and kind of help me understand why it is you think that film would work, the film you've chosen. Then number two, the creative aspect of the project. I would like you to find a way to help me understand what it is you see in the movie. I'm gonna model for you the first part of the assignment today. More on the second one maybe later, but in an effort to try to help you guys understand anything like I'm talking about, I decided to show you a movie that in my heart of hearts I would love to add to this class, but I just don't think I can. And what that movie is, I know I've brought it up before, it's a movie called The Last Dragon. It's from 1985. In the email I sent you, there's actually two links. One of the links, you probably just go ahead and open those both up if you haven't already. One of them is the trailer for the film. And when I tell you to stop here in a second, I want you to pause the video and go watch the trailer here in a minute. But before that, a little bit of setup. I'm going to have more to say about it after you watch it, because you'll see what I mean. Parts of it are maybe a little bit difficult to explain. But know that the trailer you're going to see, it's like 1.5 minutes long, something like that. I like it because it does a really good job of setting the tone of the film in some ways. But it's also, because it's, 1.5 minute summation of a movie, they may even misrepresent a couple parts of the film. So pause this video real quick, go watch the trailer, and then more on what you're about to see afterward. All right. So it is my sincere hope you are in some ways adequately impressed by that trailer. This movie is bananas. Um, Now, not all the information you gleaned from the trailer probably means as much to you here in 2021, but a couple times they call it Berry Gordy's The Last Dragon. Berry Gordy is the founder of Motown Records. Some of you may have heard of that. If you haven't, look it up. I mean, Motown Records is out of Detroit. Dude, like, basically discovered the Jackson 5 and a whole bunch of groups and artists like that. So the point I'm making here is it's really kind of weird that that guy here in 1985 decided, I'm going to spearhead a kung fu movie set in Harlem. So it's wild. It's got some stuff going on. The other thing I wanted you to know, I said the trailer, and I do think this, considering it's a minute and a half long, it does a pretty decent job of here's the story of the film, right? There's a little bit of a love story in there. Leroy, who's the main character, is a kung fu sort of prodigy, and he comes up against Shonuff, who's the dude in the shoulder pad, like legit in football shoulder pads, who calls himself the Shogun of Harlem, I think at one point. There's a very, in a way, very classic kung fu story, like evil warlord Shogun guy shows up. Leroy, who's just this dude, has to defeat him, right? But there's another the creepy white guy. His name is Eddie Arcadian. He owns an arcade, and he has like delusions of grandeur, and it's all wrapped up in his girlfriend, who he wants to get on this almost like Soul Train type show, if anyone are familiar with that. And I'm making a lot of old references here, and I apologize, but again, like, even now, I'm trying to explain all of it. It's a crazy amount of stuff wrapped into an hour and a half movie, which I do own and my boys have seen. Like, it's excellent. But why do I bring it to your attention? Well, when I first envisioned this class, no joke, I sat down with a notepad and listed front and back like a couple pages of possible movies I could teach. And originally I was like, 5 or 6 movies, something like that, be a good number. And I sat down to do the syllabus, and I realized that was too many. I think you guys would have revolted if you'd sat down that first day and I'd said, we're going to watch all this stuff. So what I decided instead is I had to severely limit myself to 3. I had to make a lot of hard choices. And part of that hard choice was I had to leave movies like this out. The reason I would love to teach it one day, and I haven't yet, is for all the craziness I'm talking to you about. Like, it's doing a lot of things that in some ways movies of the 80s that we've talked about have done. Like, in a way, Leroy is an everyman character, kind of like McClane, he's from Harlem. You see his home life and his parents, who he lives with, because he's still, he might be 18, 19, something like that. He's young, he's your age. So he's like an adult, but not really. He's kind of on that precipice, and that's again, that's part of the narrative too. But he comes from the slightly lesser means, and then you watch this, again, we talk about power fantasy, you watch his rise, like a Rocky, like a John McClane. By the end of the film, spoilers, he wins. You would assume, right? But what makes it an 80s movie, specifically 1985 in Harlem, the kinds of characters we have, it's made by Berry Gordy. This is an unfair designation, but I want you to know a little bit more like what I'm talking about here. For its time and its day, it's kind of maybe like a Black Rocky, like just a little bit. And I say all that to say, I want you to watch a scene. I can't say it enough times. This movie came out in 1985. It's a year older than I am, okay? So, like, it's old. I want you to go watch the other link I sent you. The scene is like 4 or so minutes long, okay? You will very quickly, I think, realize the ways in which the trailer maybe did not set you up for the film tonally. There's some stuff they had to kind of leave out because, you only have a minute and a half, But the only directive I will give you when you watch the scene is to the best of your ability, because you haven't seen the movie, approach it in the same way we do when we look at a scene in class. Is there anything you notice? Is there anything that stands out to you as potentially significant? Anything that we might be able to talk about further? And I'm gonna obviously share my thoughts here on the other side. So go watch it. All right. So hopefully you've had a chance to watch that other scene. I love this scene. I love this movie. Primarily, this is going to be hard. There's so much to talk about in this one scene, right? Isn't it? I could keep using this word, bananas. Like, think about this. Just to summarize really quickly what we just watched. Show Enough, who's the antagonist in the film, one of them, there's another guy, he's not in this scene, walks into a theater, decides he's going to announce himself, he's going to take somebody's seats with his crew of his little henchmen, right? There's a show's row. He does his little introduction, which I love. I don't know what genius came up with this, but his name is Show Enough, and that allows for that neat little bit of wordplay where he's like, who's the baddest, who's the prettiest, and they can say Show Enough, but it's like, because like, Show Enough, you get it. It's fucking ridiculous. But what's interesting, to begin that, after that little preamble, he finds Leroy, who's his name is Leroy Green. He uses it at one point, but people in the film keep calling him Bruce Leroy for, I would think, pretty obvious reason, like Bruce Lee, you know. He finds Leroy to be ridiculous. And to be fair, you look at Leroy, the hat he's wearing, the way he speaks, like no one talks that way outside of classic kung fu movies, like late 70s, early 80s kung fu. They talk like that. So the first point I would make to you here is that so many people in the movie, just throughout the film, are caricatures. Show Enough is absolute, like, he's a cartoon character, right? But so is Leroy. And like his big arc in the film, if you ever happen to sit down and watch it, by the end, he's less of a cartoon character. He doesn't like totally get outside of that, but he, like, that's the lesson he has to kind of learn in the end, is like, he's basically, even though he is like this kind of like kung fu master, he can't become a master until he realizes that it's not a movie, you know, even though it is. But I point all that out because I don't think it's unintentional, this scene, that they are in a movie watching Bruce Lee on screen. And even here, I have it paused on my screen, where Show Enough is fighting all these guys basically on a stage, right? Theaters don't really have this anymore, but back in the day they used to, because I think it was just places where they used to have plays and then they converted them into theaters. You used to have a stage in front of the screen, but that allows this really beautiful moment where Show Enough is actually fighting people with this like movie style kung fu in front of a screen depicting a film. Like, they are clearly wanting you, the viewer, to go, oh, this kind of feel like everything that's going on in the movie I'm watching is like echoing these other movies that I've seen or that I've heard of, right? Like, they're clearly wanting you to go, these guys are just being movie characters, right? They're kind of like trying to live that out in real life, which is crazy. Now, I give you all that to say, I've talked to people much smarter than me before about this movie. It's not like famous, right? And you've probably never heard of it, but it's famous enough. People know about it. And like one woman, she used to work here. I'd always ask her about it to like kind of needle her, and she would look at me. She goes, "That movie is racist as shit." Like, and she would just kind of laugh it off. And people will say that about this film. Primarily because it has largely minority characters, mostly black, but there's some Asian characters in here, and you have a lot of minority characters who, again, are caricatures, which would normally, rightfully, I think, be construed as racist. But again, what's interesting to me in the film, everyone is a caricature. Black, white, Asian, doesn't really matter where they come from, background-wise. They're all caricaturized. Every single, I'm trying to think of a character right now who might not be a caricature, and honest to God, it's difficult. Like they're all, I mean, Shonuff and Leroy are the most ridiculous, the most caricatured, but they're also the primary, like they're the antagonist and the protagonist, so like you see them more. Basically everybody else in the film, outside of like maybe very few exceptions, are cartoon-like, which, you know, weirdly, if you treat everyone the same, I mean, that's equality, isn't it? It's interesting to me. So like if I were to teach this film, which again, unfortunately, I've not been able to until now, but if I were to teach this film, talk to a class about it, or make a project on it, like, you know, I'm starting to model for you guys, I think one of my arguments about what the film is trying to say maybe here in 1985 is, if we can all laugh at ourselves no matter our background, you know, I mean, it's in Harlem too, which is like a bit of a melting pot, especially in the 80s. If we can all laugh at ourselves for our assumed stereotypes, and if we can caricaturize that together, that's a kind of equality. Like, to me, weirdly, the film is kind of saying, if we can take all of ourselves less seriously, that might be a weird sort of utopian avenue for, you know, getting along. I mean, and not judging each other based upon race or class or any of this other background information, right? Which again is kind of a crazy goal for an admittedly not great kung fu movie to have. Which again is part of why I love it so much. Like, it's doing so much. Like, it's in some ways the conversation this movie is trying to have is way up here, and in other ways it's kind of a B movie, like, to be a little bit generous. You see it a little bit in I think in the trailer. They talk about the glow. When a guy in this movie hits like the final level, they call it, his whole body glows, and it kind of just looks like somebody took the film after it was recorded and just like almost took like a little highlighter or something over a dude's body. Like, it's kind of shitty. So it's those competing, like, really high aspirations, I honestly believe, and then execution wise, you know, they probably didn't have as much money, time, whatever. It's just a little, you know, but I think that's what makes it so awesome. So again, other just things I would want to point you to. You may have noticed some of them. I want to try to give a quick shout out because I don't want this video to be super long. I mentioned all kinds of people. That's also represented in this scene. Like, he steps to the front and challenges the whole theater, and more or less gets what he asked for. First of all, how many people in this theater know kung fu? Do you know what I mean? Like, isn't that patently ridiculous? The two big guys who call to him from the balcony basically look like professional wrestlers kind of dudes, you know? The giant Asian man who fights him first throws his drink down, which is pretty aggressive. You probably just set that down, and he's gonna go kick his ass, right? And then, of course, this is where you find out Shonuff, like, isn't all talk. One thing you might have missed in this, what I keep telling you, is like pretty representative of like all kinds of people. The picture quality isn't great. It's 1985, and also this is YouTube. But go back and look at this giant Asian guy's girlfriend. That's a guy. That's a dude in drag. Dressed really well, and we can't know like how they're together or the extent of their relationship. This is all we see of them. But in the middle of all of this, you got all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds. Somewhere the filmmakers went, that one too, right? And she has funny dialogue. She's like, not the face, baby, and like all this stuff. And it's, again, it's ridiculous. It's hilarious. But it's also super democratic and super like melting pot-ish, you know? Like, I hate to put it this way, but this is what drew me to that like Rocky comparison I made earlier in the video. Rocky is all about the American dream, and the way we talked about it for that film was class. And there's some of that in this movie. Like, again, you don't see it in this scene, but Leroy's parents own a pizza shop in Harlem. So they're small business owners, and again, they are the example in the film of trying to, or one of the examples of trying to sort of make the American dream work like in an honest way. One of the antagonists, the one you don't see in this scene, tries to do it in a dishonest way. So like they obviously want you thinking about that. But there's other ways to think about the American dream, right? Not just class. And one of them is, again, this like equal utopia where everyone is represented, but no matter their background, and everyone like can coexist, right? We get that in this scene, like in ways that Rocky can't even dream of, that most movies I think just can't make happen, and we do it fast. This is a 4-minute scene, most of which we concentrate on showing off because he's doing all the talking. It's just wild to me. So yeah, I mean, I'll cut it off there. Again, I'm trying to think of anything else you guys might mention when you think about the scene. The fact that it's shot in a theater cannot be overstated. Like, that's super important. They're fighting while the Bruce Lee tape is going on behind them, sort of showing you, like, asking you to draw the parallel between Bruce Lee and Shonuff, right? Which is interesting because Bruce Lee is not the antagonist most of the time, right? He's the protagonist. But they want you to know that Shonuff kind of knows his stuff and all this sort of thing. Leroy leaves, doesn't fight. He's very peaceful, right? He's that cliche monk figure that you would see in a full-on kung fu movie. But he's not. If you ever go to watch the film, and I'll stop after this, you find out, again, he's part of a family from Harlem. Like, he has a little brother who laughs at him the whole movie. He's like, why are you like this? Why do you dress like this? Why do you talk like this? You look like a fucking idiot. It's 80s Harlem. He does. He looks like an idiot to everyone around him pretty much. But again, I think the movie is trying to think about representation, what we expect out of certain characters. So if you were to see this film in 1985 and you spend about 10 or 15 minutes with Leroy, at some point you're going to look to whoever came with you and be like, is this guy for real? Like, why is he the hat and the fucking, why is he, and the movie is kind of saying, well, why not? Right? In a way. And again, it's doing many other things too that honestly, if you guys have questions, I would love to talk to you about it on Wednesday. I love this movie. But to bring it back to what I'm asking you to do, everything I just gave you is sort of addressing the first part of the prompt. I told you there's 2 parts. The first part is, what movie would you want to add to the discussion we've had as a class? And why? And then the second part, of course, would be some creative aspect, which we'll talk about more. But here again, like, how do you think the film functions as a part of the conversation we've had? How do you think it could maybe extend the conversation we've had as a class? Anything like that, I think, is an excellent place to start. To close it all off, I would say, don't forget about your homework for Wednesday. It's a discussion board post. It's pretty self-explanatory, I think. Again, it just asks you to go ahead and start thinking about the project. This will help you. It'll also help your classmates. You can kind of bounce ideas off each other. You can respond to each other, right, about those ideas. And if you have any notion of what you might do to present your thoughts on the film you've chosen, you can go ahead and start that conversation in the discussion as well. Again, like, all of this is meant to get the ball rolling in terms of what you might do, but also let your classmates chime in. Sometimes you guys are actually a great help to each other. And that's what we're doing. It's not due until, the 28th of April of this month. So we have some time, but again, it's one of those things that on the one hand, it can seem kind of easy, and on the other, if you wait until the 27th, it's going to feel pretty hard, I think. So let's go ahead and start it, this discussion board. We'll talk about it more on Wednesday. I think comparatively anyway, this could be fun depending on what you choose and what you decide to do with it. So I'll leave it at that. I hope everyone's well, and yeah, I'll see you on Wednesday. Thank you.